I have never been good at counting the years since she left. People tell me it has been 3, but to me, it has always felt like yesterday. Her name was Mei Lin. She was the kind of woman who could walk into a crowded dim sum restaurant and make every head turn, not because she was the loudest or the most dressed up, but because she had this warmth. Like every word that came out of her mouth was meant just for you. Fell for that warmth before I even realized it. We got married on a rainy afternoon in Kowloon, in a small tea house that had been in her family for generations. The steam from the tea urns, mixed with the scent of chrysanthemum flowers her mother had tied into little bundles. She wore a pale gold cheongsam, hand-embroidered by her grandmother. I still remember the way the silk caught the light when she turned toward me. 3 years ago, on our 3rd wedding anniversary, we celebrated the only way we knew how quietly. No fancy rooftop dinners, no big surprises. Just the 2 of us walking along the harbor, sharing skewers of grilled squid and laughing at the street performers. She told me she had something for me back at the apartment, a surprise she'd hidden for weeks. We never made it that far. It was close to 9:40 p.m. when she stepped off the curb to hail a taxi. The traffic light was red, but a delivery van came from nowhere, tires screaming against wet asphalt. I remember the sound more than the sight, that high-pitched shriek that turns into silence too quickly. By the time I ran to her, she was lying in the rain, her gold dress darkened and heavy with water. Her lips moved barely, but I could not hear her over the pounding in my own ears. The paramedics tried, but she was gone before they reached Queen Elizabeth Hospital. They covered her face, but I pulled the sheet back just to see her one last time. Her skin was already cooling, yet her hair still smelled faintly of jasmine. I told myself I would remember that scent forever. What I did not know then was that forever would be much longer than I expected. It rained again the night she came back. Hong Kong does not have gentle rain. It has rain that presses the city flat, that makes neon bleed and buses hiss like kettles. I had fallen asleep on the couch with the television still murmuring in Cantonese and a cup of cold tea on the table. The clock on the wall said 2:12 a.m. I must have dreamed first, because in the dream, she was exactly as she used to be. Mei Lin stood outside our apartment door, with her umbrella folded, water streaming from the ribs, her hair stuck in dark lines against her cheeks. She smiled in that patient way she did when I worked late and forgot to eat. "Open the door," she said. "I am cold." I woke with my heart too loud in my throat. The room was dark, except for the streetlight stuttering through the blinds. The television had gone to a blue screen. I told myself to breathe, to stand up, to turn on every lamp like a sensible person. I did none of those things. Instead, I listened. There it was, the soft, irregular tapping that only wet shoes make on tile. Not from the hallway, from inside. A draft slid over my ankles, and I realized the front door was not latched. It was open by the width of a palm. I forced myself up and crossed the living room. The air smelled like the first 5 minutes of rain, metallic, clean, almost sweet. I pushed the door shut and slid the bolt. My hand was shaking in a way I would have mocked on a client shoot. When I turned around, a thin trail of water curved from the entryway toward the bedroom, as if someone had dragged the edge of their umbrella along the floor. "No," I said out loud, not sure who I was arguing with. "No, we are not doing that." I followed the water anyway. The bedroom was exactly as I had left it. Sheets pulled up, her side untouched, for 3 years because I could not bring myself to sleep there. Not really. A breeze moved the curtain. Though the window was closed, I flipped the switch. The bulb flickered once and settled into a hard, yellow light. On the nightstand, the one that had been hers, sat a porcelain cup from her mother's tea set. We had packed that set into a box after the funeral. I had sealed the box with brown tape and wrote, in my own hand, "Do not open." Steam rose from the cup. Not much. Enough to fog a small crescent on the glass of the picture frame behind it. In the frame was our wedding photo. Somewhere over the years, it had begun to lean inside the mount, so the horizon behind us tipped a little to the right. Now, the frame was straightened, dead level. Who did this? My voice came out wrong, too soft, as if I was in a museum. A drip hit the floor behind me. I turned. There, on the wooden chair where she used to lay her cardigan, was a spreading dark circle, as if fabric had just been set there, soaked. Another drip fell from above. I looked up. No leak. Ceiling clean. The next drip landed on my forearm cold, perfectly round, as if the air had condensed into a tear. I backed away until I bumped the bed. The mattress gave a little, the way it does when someone takes a cautious seat on the other side. The air dipped, subtle as a held breath. The blanket pulled a fraction toward the empty space beside me. If grief is a trick of the mind, it is a thorough one. I reached for the cup. The porcelain was warm enough to prove a point. I brought it to my nose. Jasmine. The exact blend Maylin favored, the leaves she kept in a steel tin at the back of the cupboard. Because she said light made tea grow old, "You cannot be here," I whispered. "You are gone." Something brushed my shoulder. The touch was lighter than a moth's wing, but carried a weight no insect ever could. Recognition. It was the way she used to steady herself when getting into bed. 2 fingers on my shoulder, almost not touching at all. Outside, a taxi honked too short. One long and the city felt suddenly too close, as if all its windows had pivoted toward mine. The clock in the living room ticked over to 2:16 a.m. I set the cup down before my hands betrayed me and knelt to the floor to trace the thin river of water back to the door. Halfway along, caught against the baseboard, was a single strand of hair. Long, dark, kinked at the end, the way hers always was after rain. The bolt on the front door was still thrown, the chain still latched, and yet the trail began on the inside. The night after she came back, I told myself it was exhaustion, that I had been working too many late assignments, sleeping too little, letting grief fester into hallucination. But exhaustion does not move objects. It started small. On the morning after that rain, the porcelain cup was gone from her nightstand. I searched the entire apartment, even the box in the storage closet where I had locked the rest of her tea set. The box was still sealed with my tape, untouched. I even checked the trash, as if I had sleepwalked and broken it. By evening, it was back on the nightstand. This time, empty, bone dry. On the 3rd morning, the smell hit me before I even opened the bedroom door. Jasmine tea, brewed perfectly. Her favorite blend always had a sweetness at the edge, like honey without the weight. The cup sat on the table, steam curling into the air as if it had just been poured. No one had been in my apartment. I knew that, because I had become obsessive about checking the bolt twice, 3 times before bed. Then the photographs started changing. Our wedding photo, the one on my nightstand, was angled again, but this time, not toward me. The frame faced the wall. When I flipped it back, I felt something on the glass, faint, almost invisible unless the light caught it. An oily imprint of lips. Mei Lin never wore lipstick, but she had this habit of leaning forward to kiss the glass whenever she dusted the frames. I used to tease her about it. Over the next week, little shifts crept in. Her side of the bed no longer looked untouched. The pillow had an indent, the blanket slightly pulled back. Once, I found the small silk hair tie she always wore to bed lying on the dresser, the exact one she had been wearing the night she died. And then there was the scent, not just jasmine anymore, but the faint trace of her perfume, the one with the lilac-colored bottle she had to special order from Guangzhou. The smell would bloom in the room after midnight, strongest on nights when the rain battered against the glass. I started sleeping with the bedroom door shut, but that didn't matter. The scent seeped through. The air in the apartment began to feel different after sunset thicker, as if I was breathing in the same space as someone else. I caught myself pausing in the hallway, holding my breath, because I could swear I heard another rhythm alongside my own. A second heartbeat. By the end of the month, I stopped inviting anyone over. I stopped answering my phone, and I stopped lying to myself. Something had followed me home that night 3 years ago, and it refused to leave. The first person to notice was Mrs. Wang from the apartment below mine. She was in her 70s, still sharp, in the way old Hong Kong women can be. Every sentence a mixture of advice and warning. Every glance like she was reading a line of fate from your forehead. It was a damp Tuesday afternoon when I ran into her on the stairwell. She was hauling a bag of groceries up with one hand and holding a folded newspaper in the other. "Ah, Mr. Leung," she said, squinting at me. "You look thin. Too thin. Is your wife not cooking for you anymore?" I froze halfway up the steps. "Mrs. Wang, you know my wife is gone." She tilted her head, as if I had just said something absurd. "Gone. No, no," I hear her. "Every night. She walks in your apartment. I hear the floorboards. And sometimes she sings." The bag of groceries swayed in her hand. Something about the way she said sings made the skin between my shoulders tighten. "She's not there," I told her. "I live alone." Mrs. Wang sighed through her nose. "The way people do when they've decided you're lying to yourself. Do you know about ghost wives?" I didn't answer, so she went on. "In the old villages, they say some women will not leave their husbands, even in death. Their spirit keeps the marriage cooking, cleaning, warming the bed. If the husband forgets her, she becomes angry. But if he keeps her memory, she stays close." I tried to laugh, but it came out uneven. "And if the husband wants her to leave?" Mrs. Wang's eyes sharpened. "Why would you? A ghost wife can be jealous." She leaned closer, lowering her voice until I could smell the faint medicinal bitterness of her breath. "If you are not careful, she will take you with her into her world." I stood there long after she'd gone inside, the creak of her door echoing down the stairwell. I told myself she was just an old woman repeating village stories. But that night, when I went to boil water for tea, I found the steel tin in the cupboard already open, leaves scattered like a small green offering on the counter. And in the reflection of the kitchen window, for just a moment, I thought I saw her standing behind me, her head tilted the way it used to be when she was waiting for me to speak. The cup I was holding slipped in my hand, clinking hard against the counter. When I looked again, the space behind me was empty. It was a Friday night when the rain came back, the kind of rain that doesn't just fall, it surrounds you, fills every gap in the air, turns the city into a tunnel of water and light. I closed the curtains early, made sure the locks were turned, and tried to lose myself in editing photos from an old assignment. Sometime after 1:40 a.m., I must have fallen asleep at my desk. When I opened my eyes, the room was different. Not the apartment, not exactly. The furniture was mine, but the light was wrong. Softer, tinted gold, like it was filtering through an old film reel. The air carried the warm scent of jasmine tea and the faint powder of her perfume. And she was there. Maylin lay on the bed, her hair fanned across the pillow, wearing the pale gold cheongsam from our wedding day. She smiled the way she used to in the mornings, slow and shy, as if every day was still our first. "Come here," she said. My legs moved before I could think. I sat down beside her, the mattress dipping under my weight. She reached up, fingers brushing my cheek, cold, but not unpleasant, like marble that had been in the shade. I closed my eyes when she leaned in and pressed her lips to my forehead. The kiss burned cold, a strange contradiction, and I opened my eyes to tell her so. But she was gone. The room was dark again, lit only by the city bleeding through the curtains. My hands were trembling in my lap. I was about to convince myself it was just another dream when I saw it. On the pillow beside me lay a single strand of her hair, long, dark, still wet. I picked it up slowly, holding it under the faint light from the street. It was real, too real. And when I set it down on the nightstand, I noticed the cup again, the porcelain one from her mother's tea set. Only this time, the tea inside was still steaming, and floating at the surface was the hair tie she used to wear to bed. My throat tightened. I whispered her name into the dark, something someone exhaled just behind my ear. I did not sleep after that. I sat in the living room with every lamp on, the porcelain cup still sitting on the nightstand in the other room, daring me to touch it again. At 4:27 a.m., I decided I had to know. In the closet, behind an old tripod case, was my oldest camera, a heavy DSLR I had stopped using years ago. It had a timer function, one I used to use for self-portraits. I set it to take a photo every 30 seconds, placed it on the dresser facing the bed, and climbed under the blankets. If she came back, I would see her, and if I saw nothing, maybe I could finally stop believing in ghosts. I must have drifted off, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was spilling through the blinds. The camera's memory card was full. My hands shook as I plugged it into my laptop. The first dozen photos were of me lying alone, restless, shifting positions. Then, in the 13th image, there was a change. The blanket on her side of the bed dipped. No one visible, just the shape, like someone had lain down beside me. By the 22nd photo, there was more. A faint blur where her head would be on the pillow, darker than the air around it. I leaned closer to the screen, adjusting the contrast until the pixels sharpened. Her hair, black, fine, cascading over the pillowcase. The 23rd photo made me push my chair back so hard it hit the wall. She was looking directly at the camera. Her eyes were open wide, glassy, the way they had been in the hospital under the harsh fluorescent lights. But her mouth was curved in that same patient smile from our wedding. I zoomed in, half expecting the image to dissolve into artifacts, but the details only grew clearer. The faint scar at the edge of her lip, the mole beneath her left eye, the way her hair kinked at the ends from rain. I clicked to the next frame. The bed was empty again. I sat there for an hour, scrolling back and forth between those two images, the one where she was absent and the one where she was there. Each time, my chest tightened a little more. When I finally stood to shut the laptop, I caught my reflection in the black screen. But I wasn't alone in it. Behind me, over my shoulder, was the faintest curve of a smile. And it wasn't mine. I lasted 2 more nights after seeing that photo. 2 nights of pretending I could still live in that apartment without watching every shadow stretch a little too long, without feeling the mattress shift under a weight that wasn't mine. On the 3rd night, I made my decision. If Mrs. Wong was right, if keeping her things was keeping her here, then I had to let them go. I started with the easy items. Clothes from the closet, folded carefully as if she might wear them again, then stuffed into garbage bags. Shoes she'd only worn once or twice. The small silk scarf she had wrapped around my wrist the night we met. Claiming I'd stolen her seat at the tea house, each piece carried a weight I could feel in my arms. But I kept going until the bed was bare, the dresser empty, the walls stripped of photos. The last thing left was the pale gold cheongsam. It hung in the back of the wardrobe in a dry cleaning bag, the silk catching a faint gleam even in the dull light. I hesitated before pulling it free. I took everything to the rooftop incinerator. The rain had stopped for once, but the air was damp, the kind that clings to your skin. I lit the match, watched it flare against the night, and touched it to the edge of a scarf. The fabric curled black, the fire catching faster than I expected. But when I set the flame to the cheongsam, it went out, just died, as if the fabric refused to burn. A gust of wind slid across my neck, carrying the scent of jasmine stronger than I had ever smelled it. And then I felt them, arms, thin but unyielding, wrapping around me from behind. Her voice was right at my ear, breath colder than the night air. You promised you would never leave me. My knees went weak, and the cheongsam slipped from my hands. I could see the fabric moving even without wind, folding in on itself like a living thing. The arms tightened, pulling me back toward the shadows at the rooftop's edge. I twisted free, stumbling hard against the wall, my heart slamming in my ribs. The night was empty. Again, no arms, no figure, just the dress lying limp at my feet. But in that silence, I heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, circling me, though there was no one there. The dress had shifted. It now lay in a perfect circle on the ground, as if marking a place for 2 people to stand. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to get off that rooftop, to drop the dress, to leave everything behind and never look back. But my legs wouldn't move. The cheongsam lay in that perfect circle, and the air inside it shimmered like heat rising from pavement, except the night was cold. My breath fogged in front of me, but inside that circle, there was no fog at all. It was still, too still. Then the shimmer thickened. At first, it was just a haze of gold, then silk threads knitting together in the air, piece by piece, until the cheongsam wasn't lying on the ground anymore. It was being worn. She was standing there, Maylene. Her hair was as I remembered, cascading down her shoulders in waves. But her skin was paler now, with a softness that was almost translucent. Her lips were the same gentle curve, but her eyes were wrong. They were too clear, like deep water with no bottom. She stepped toward me, and her bare feet made no sound against the rooftop tiles. "You look tired." "My love," she said. "Come home. We can rest." I backed away until my shoulders hit the cold steel of the rooftop railing. "You're dead." She tilted her head, the same way she used to when I said something foolish. "Death doesn't change marriage," she whispered. When she reached for me, her fingers passed through my shirt and pressed against my skin, ice flooding my chest, seizing my lungs. The city blurred around us, neon bending into long smears of red and green. I could feel my feet leaving the ground, though she hadn't lifted me. It was as if the space between us had collapsed, pulling me forward without touch. In the next blink, I wasn't on the rooftop anymore. We were in our old bedroom, the walls gleaming with the warm gold light from our wedding day. The bed was freshly made, the tea set steaming on the table. It looked perfect, almost. The window showed no city, no rain, just a darkness so deep it felt like falling. Maylin smiled and took my hand. Her fingers were still cold, but I no longer felt the urge to pull away. The air here was thick, like every breath was honey. I realized with a sick lurch that I could barely remember how I had gotten here or why I had been afraid. "You see," she murmured, drawing me toward the bed, "now we can be together forever." From the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of our wedding photo on the nightstand. Only this time, it was different. The frame showed the two of us standing side by side, both wearing gold. And my eyes in the photo were just as clear and bottomless as hers. I woke, or at least I thought I did, to the sound of rain against glass. The gold light was gone. The bedroom looked exactly as it had the night she first returned. Dim, heavy with the scent of jasmine. My body felt stiff, like I'd been lying in the same position for hours. I turned my head. She was there beside me, her face inches from mine, watching me with that same patient smile. Her hair spread over the pillow, damp from rain that had never touched this room. "You're awake," she whispered, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. "Good. We have so much time." I tried to speak, but my throat locked. My voice felt caught behind my ribs. She reached over, brushed her fingers across my cheek, and the paralysis broke, not enough to move away, but enough for me to feel every cold inch of her touch. In the corner, the porcelain tea set was waiting, steam curling in slow, deliberate spirals. On the table beside it lay the pale gold cheongsam, neatly folded, as if ready for me to wear. I closed my eyes. Maybe if I didn't look at her, I could convince myself this was another dream. But then she leaned in close, her breath freezing against my ear. "You promised me forever, and forever has only just begun." The next morning, Mrs. Wong saw me leaving the building. She told the other tenants later that I was holding hands with a woman in a gold dress, both of us smiling like newlyweds. But when the security guard checked the CCTV, there was no woman, only me, walking out into the rain, my hand raised in the air, as if gripping something no one else could see. And that night, in the apartment, the tea set still steamed, 2 cups, full They say the building was torn down a year after I left, condemned for structural safety, though anyone who lived there knew it wasn't the walls that were dangerous. The story began to spread in the wet markets and the mahjong parlors. A foreign-born photographer who married a local girl. She died young. He never recovered. And then, one monsoon season, people began hearing two voices in his flat, his deep, tired tone and a softer one that carried the lilt of old Cantonese love songs. Mrs. Wong swore she saw them walking together every night for a month before they vanished. Others claimed they'd hear the elevator open at 2:10 a.m., footsteps on the third floor, and the faint clink of porcelain teacups. One man, a contractor hired to clear the units, swore he found a locked drawer in that apartment. Inside, neatly wrapped in red silk, was a pale gold cheongsam. It was warm to the touch, like it had been worn moments before. He left it there. 3 days later, he quit the job without explanation. Now, whenever the rain falls heavy in Mongkok, some taxi drivers tell a cautionary tale. If you're driving past the old market on Shanghai Street after midnight, and you see a couple waving for a ride, a man with tired eyes and a woman in a gold dress, don't stop. Because sometimes the door will open and no one will get in. And sometimes someone will, but you'll never see them in the mirror.